In mid-September of 2017, a Saudi royal prince named Prince Khalid bin Al-Saud was having a very crucial meeting regarding buying a $440 million stake in the famous Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach, Florida. The deal was about to go down in the very hotel with the owner of the Fontainebleau, Jeffrey Sofer, a Miami-based billion-dollar real estate tycoon. However, Sofer stated his concerns that the business is going through financial struggles and buying a stake in the property won't be enough to revive the business. To this, the prince replies, "It's not just $440 million investment, Jeffrey. We royals don't invest for decades, we invest for dynasties." Experiencing the sheer confidence and royalty the prince was exuding, Jeffrey Sofer agrees to the preliminary deal, and the royal prince with his entourage of bodyguards leave the hotel. Except there was just one problem. He was not Prince Khalid bin Al-Saud. He was a career con man named Anthony Gignac impersonating a Saudi royal. But given his confidence, the way he dressed, and the luxury he showed off was believable enough even for the most skeptical investors to invest into his business ideas that made it possible for this prince of fraud to steal hundreds of millions of dollars from banks and investors and outrun the FBI for over 30 years. In late 1997, Prince Khalid, aka Anthony Gignac, was being taken to a federal penitentiary in Florida for committing multiple financial frauds. However, somewhere on the way to the prison, he asked the two men to make a quick stop at an American Express office. The men stop the car, the prince gets out and goes directly inside the American Express office and almost starts weeping, stating that his name is Prince Khalid bin Al-Saud and he has lost his American Express credit card, and if the card is not replaced instantly, his father, the king, will be very angry. The staff at the office suspects him to be a real prince, but one of the staff members puts a condition on this fake prince, stating that if he manages to answer 2 questions regarding his last 2 purchases using his credit card, they will know if he was a real prince. And miraculously, Anthony is able to answer the questions correctly, and the bank believes that he was the real Prince Khalid, and within an hour issues him a new American Express Platinum credit card with an astonishing $200 million of credit limit on it. The prince happily takes the card, while one of the staff members says, quote, "It's always a pleasure doing business with you, Your Highness," end quote, and the prince leaves. And the 2 men waiting in the car were not the police or the FBI. They were the bail bondsmen who were taking the prince back to the jail when he failed to make the bond payments on time. However, now with $200 million in his pocket, he simply asked the 2 men to turn around and head back to the bondsman office so that he can complete the payment. However, it was not easy for this prince to just casually walk inside a bank and ask them to give him $200 million. Anthony Gignac had been carrying this fake identity for almost 2 decades, making multiple mistakes, getting arrested multiple times before he was able to perfect his art of defrauding, and this is how he did it. At the age of 17 years, young Anthony leaves his Michigan house and moves to Los Angeles, California. In LA, he assumes the identity of Prince Khalid bin Al-Saud, enters the Wilshire Hotel in Beverly Hills, and rents a room for $3,500, including food and beverages. He spends 4 days in the hotel, and as he's checking out, claiming he's just going for a drive, he tells the management that his father will be covering the bills and that the payment should already be on its way before he returns. Hours pass by, but neither the prince nor the payment arrives. The same day, he goes to Rodeo Drive and takes 2 Louis Vuitton luggages and a rare coin collection from a luxury boutique, assuring the owner he would be receiving the payment in a short while via wire transfer. And this was just the start of the prince's adventure, and he himself had no idea how much power a royal prince could have just by saying that he was a true Saudi prince. However, in a few days, the prince arrives back at the Wilshire Hotel, where he is arrested immediately for committing a fraud, and while leaving the hotel lobby, he constantly yells, "I am the real prince, and there is a big misunderstanding here, and you can't treat me like this just because the payments got delayed." The prince, aka Gignac, spends a few days behind the bars and is released on parole. He quickly leaves LA and moves to San Francisco, fearing his further arrest. In San Francisco, he starts staying at another luxury hotel, bilking them with bills upwards of $15,000. However, he's arrested again for committing a credit card fraud using a false name of Prince Khalid bin Al Saud. He spends around 2 months in a local prison, and after his release, he flees directly to Hawaii. At this point, this prince starts to realize staying at luxury hotels won't really make him rich. It could just temporarily provide him a sense of opulence, but it was too risky. And therefore, he decided it was time to make some real money in a royal Saudi style. While living in Hawaii, Anthony starts learning about financial markets, how stocks operate, understanding the financial legal systems and its loopholes. And he quickly goes through a whole list of all the different types of businesses the Saudi royal family owned. And one name, the Saudi Aramco, or the Saudi Arabian Oil Company, instantly becomes the most lucrative company in Gignac's mind as the perfect staging ground for millions of dollars he was about to steal. He starts with forging a fake document to make it appear as a legitimate stock of Saudi Aramco, and once he was convinced with its appearance, he starts interacting with other guests at the Halekulani luxury resort, spending time with them over food and drinks to become friendly and win over their confidence before playing his Saudi card. By the end of year 1992, at around Christmas, Anthony finally makes his move on a couple, stating that he has the perfect gift for Christmas. He says, how would they feel if they suddenly had a piece of ownership, a stock, in his father's privately owned oil company just for $8,500 a stock and a piece of oil-rich land in Saudi Arabia as a gift if they show their interest in accepting his stock offer. The couple, who was already a little buzzed with all the party and drinks, got excited and wrote a check for $8,500 and gave it to the prince, in exchange for 2 cents worth of computer-printed paper and a piece of land that didn't even exist. A few days later, the prince, in a complete panic mode, approaches another couple at the resort, stating that he is a royal prince of Saudi Arabia and he has lost his credit card somewhere on the beach, and pleads with them to pay $21,000 in hotel and food expenses, and in exchange, he will give the couple multiple stocks of his father's oil company and a large piece of oil-rich land in Saudi Arabia for doing this favor. And the couple buys into Gignac's lie and pays for all of his expenses at the luxury hotel. At this point, Anthony Gignac not only starts thinking, but also had a first-hand proof that taking a persona of a royal prince can really make him some serious money, and defrauding the greedy rich people is far easier than he thought it would be. The prince heads back to mainland America. However, while trying to sell the same stock to another rich businessman in Miami, the businessman catches his fraud, calls the police, and the prince is arrested again on the charges of committing a financial fraud. While in prison, he contacts a lawyer in Miami named Oscar Rodriguez and tells him that his name is Prince Khalid bin Al Saud, and admits that he did make some blunders of delaying payments after his wild shopping spree, but he never intended to rob hotels or luxury stores. And Rodriguez buys his story and asks him what does he want from him. Gignac replies that if he manages to bail him out of the prison, he will win the king's favor, and who knows, he might become one of the leading lawyers dealing with all these cases of the royal kingdom. And Rodriguez starts thinking this could be a life-changing opportunity if that person in the jail cell is really the royal Saudi prince. Therefore, Rodriguez enlists two bail bondsmen, Tom O'Connell and Francisco Marty, to post a $46,000 bond to pull the royal prince out of the prison. They go to the prison, file the paperwork, and that's it. The so-called prince was out again. However, this time, Rodriguez's men take him directly to their office and wait for the payment of $46,000 to arrive directly from the Saudi kingdom. Hours pass by, but the money doesn't arrive. And one of the men tells Gignac, quote, "Listen, Prince, the money's not coming. We gotta put you back in jail." End quote. They pick up the prince and head back to the federal penitentiary. However, this time, Gignac was determined to not go back into the prison. He asked the bondsman to stop at the American Express office, which was right on the way to the prison. He heads straight to the American Express office and almost starts weeping, stating that his name is Prince Khalid bin Al Saud and he wants his platinum card replaced immediately because the king would be utmost angry if his order is not respected. After answering the two questions correctly regarding his last two purchases using the card, the bank believes he is the real prince and immediately issues him a fresh platinum card with a $200 million line of credit. The prince and the bondsman head back to the office, he pays the bond fee, and the prince was finally free. Just two right answers, a false royal identity, and suddenly a con man who was being taken back to the jail was now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He buys a luxury car, and with $200 million in his pocket, he goes back on another shopping spree. He purchases two gold Rolex watches, an emerald and diamond-studded bracelet, multiple gold chains, and a large diamond ring. With all that money and diamonds and Rolex, the prince heads back to his hometown in Michigan and hires a young girl named Jessica as his personal secretary, and she begins accompanying him everywhere the prince went. Hotels, clubs, and private parties to make sure that people knew that a new prince was in town. However, within a few weeks, the American Express fraud department catches up to Gignac's lie, blocks his card, and quickly calls the authorities to find and apprehend this fake prince. The two bondsmen get a hold of him at a hotel in New York and take him directly to New York's LaGuardia Airport. At the terminal, right before the flight, the prince starts yelling, quote, "I've been kidnapped. If there are any of my loyal subjects here, please call the embassy and CNN." End quote. The security at the airport quickly apprehend the two bondsmen for kidnapping a person, but are freed quickly when they show the paperwork regarding transporting a con man back to the prison. However, it was too risky to take another flight, so they rent a car, throw Gignac in the trunk, and drive 24 hours down to Miami. Somewhere at a small truck stop, they pull him out for some food and water, and this is when Anthony Gignac confesses that he is not a prince and is just putting on an elaborate act. One of the bondsmen asks him, but how did he manage to steal $200 million from American Express within an hour? And he says he bought two Rolexes worth $22,000 each that went straight to the two American Express staff members who gave him the answers to the questions he was about to be asked. Everything was pre-planned. In Miami, the prince is sent back to the prison for many, many years for committing millions of dollars of credit card fraud and identity theft. Everyone was tired of this billion-dollar nobody who had been in and out of the jail at least 11 times, serving from a few days to a couple of years. But this person just never wanted to learn a lesson. Finally, when he was released in 2011, he understood the fact that he cannot become a real prince on his own. He needed a team, a person who had connections with the top 1%. And with a stroke of luck, he found one. Comes Carl Martin Williamson, a 51-year-old British asset and wealth manager who had connections with top elites all over the world, or so he claimed. Williamson did make some good money and connections and knew one or two things about the investment market. In 2015, Williamson finally met the prince and he showed Williamson his bank account, which reflected over $600 million, and they instantly became buddies for obvious reasons. This is when the prince, aka Anthony Gignac, admits he doesn't actually know how to reel in high rollers to become a billionaire. To this, Williamson replies that to look legitimate and gain trust of the investors, they're gonna need three things: an investment company that appears to make millions of dollars every year, a luxury property where the rich live, and a show-off that proves that they're already pulling in the big bucks. Both the prince and Williamson set up a company named Martin Williamson International LLC and announced its opening in July of 2015. They lease a luxury penthouse on Fisher Island in Miami and start showing off all the prince's wealth: Ferraris, Rolls Royces, and private parties on yacht that never seem to end. And of course, Foxy, Prince's favorite chihuahua that he carried with him in a $2,000 Louis Vuitton dog carrier. And to top it all off, a complete entourage with a personal secretary and bodyguards that followed the prince wherever he went. Williamson even purchased a fake diplomat license plate for his cars on eBay to add more glint to the royalty. And in the era of social media, he constantly posted on his Instagram account, Prince Dubai 07, photos of his dog, Rolls Royce, expensive gold Rolex watches, cash, Rolex sitting on the cash. The list never ended. With Prince's visible royal lifestyle and Williamson's real high net worth connections, they created a perfect combo to pull in as much investment as they could in their company. Williamson contacts an investment banker in London and asks her to show her loyalty to the prince if she is interested in the business by lending him $150,000 for the start. And she does it in a heartbeat because obviously she trusted Williamson, and she also understood a partnership with the Saudi royal kingdom is a completely different ballgame. And this investment banker opens the floodgates of more investors who were equally interested in the royal prince's business. And within a few days, more than $8 million of investment starts pouring in the name of a pre-offering of an IPO, aka initial public offer, of the Saudi Aramco. Williamson even makes a fake financial statement for the prince reflecting more than $2 billion in his bank account and reels another Dutch investor in to give him $5 million to show his loyalty to the prince. And he not only gives the money, but also gives him an expensive Aston Martin and a few Rolex watches as a token of respect and friendship. However, the fake prince almost became blind swimming in all that glitter and wealth that he started committing a series of mistakes that was about to become the ultimate reason for his downfall. In September of 2017, a well-known Miami-based billionaire, Jeffrey Sofer, receives a call from the very investment banker from London who was investing in the prince's IPO, stating that the prince himself is interested in buying a 30% stake in Fontainebleau Hotel for $440 million. Sofer knew that the business was suffering and was knee-deep in debts, and therefore he agreed to meet the prince regarding the Fontainebleau deal. In the coming week, Prince with his entourage, the secretary, the London-based banker, and Williamson leave their Fisher Island penthouse to meet Sofer at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach. The prince is welcomed at the hotel, and he and his team take reserved seats at the pool deck area. A few minutes later, Jeffrey Sofer arrives, and they start a very crucial discussion about the Fontainebleau investment, and the prince assures Sofer that he is direct in line to the throne of the Saudi kingdom, and there is no need to worry about the financial struggles the business is going through. However, Jeffrey Sofer notices something was off about the prince. First of all, he had the perfect American accent and not even a slightest hint of Arabic influencing his English. Second of all, he accidentally picks up a glass of champagne from the table. Sofer thought he's an Arab and we are in a public setting, so why would a Saudi prince pick up a glass of champagne unless he indulges in alcohol openly? This created a doubt in Sofer's mind about the legitimacy of the prince. However, with all the people around, he quickly brushed off the idea and got back into the discussion. A few hours later, the meeting ended on a positive note and the prince, with his entourage, left the hotel. However, Jeffrey Sofer had his doubts and he thought to himself what this walking box of jewelry and his team of clowns is all about. And therefore, he hires a team of private investigators to dig into Prince Khalid's background. A few days later, Jeffrey gives a call to the prince, inviting him to a private lunch in Aspen, Colorado, to continue the discussion regarding the hotel. The prince arrives at the airport, and Jeffrey, Prince, and his team fly out to Aspen for a private lunch meeting. At the restaurant, everyone starts ordering starters and drinks, and when the waiter asks the prince what would he like to have, the prince replies, quote, "1 prosciutto, please," end quote. The very moment Jeffrey hears the prince order a pork dish, he instantly realizes this guy is not a prince. What kind of a Muslim eats pork and drinks alcohol? However, Jeffrey maintains his demeanor, and while returning back to Miami, he opens a full-blown investigation about this clown and informs the authorities. After landing in Miami, the prince gets the information that Sofer has opened a background investigation on him, and fearing his revelation of his fake identity, within a few days, he flees to Paris. When he returned back to America, the FBI was waiting at the airport. He was arrested immediately, and this Prince Khalid game was finally over. Anthony Gignac was trialed, and he pled guilty to credit card frauds, grand theft auto, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and dozens of other charges.